So good morning, BrokerBin. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. I'm really happy that you're all here with us today for this ITAD market Q&A edition of BrokerBin Insights. In today's webinar, we hope to provide insight around the current market conditions of our industry, specifically for refurbished technology, as well as share some tips for determining market values, for determining target markets and resale value and best practices for wholesale buyers and sellers. My name is Renee Keel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at BrokerBin, and I'm super excited to be able to help moderate today's webinar. I'm joined by Rob Van Demeltrot, who's a Senior Account Manager here at BrokerBin. And to be fair, Rob wears many hats around here. And we are really honored to have two very special guests with us today who are partners of BrokerBin, but more importantly, ITAD experts who have served our industry very well for many years. We have Corey Donovan, who is the president of Alta Technologies with us, as well as Dave Manning from Iron Mountain. Now, Dave has graciously agreed to step in last minute because Evram with Procuri isn't able to make it. And as we all know, life happens, and we certainly hope to circle back to a conversation with Evram in the future. But today, we're just really grateful that Dave has agreed to join us. So, Corey and Dave, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for asking.
Hey, Renee, thank you for having us. Exciting to be here on BrokerBin TV with the pros of BrokerBin and Rob. No, just kidding. Rob will probably close a couple deals today while he's on this call.
Yeah.
And,
Lord.
honestly, to be on with Dave Manning, I've known you a long time, man, and Iron Mountain is lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. It's good to
That's
be
awesome.
on BrokerBin TV.
Thanks, guys. So just really quick, today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the full recording in a follow-up email with everyone who's registered. So please feel free to share that with colleagues or anyone who may have missed us live this morning. Alrighty, okay, let's jump right in. Corey and Dave, will each of you tell us about your company, including your specialty and the ITAD services you offer?
Corey, why don't you start?
All right, sounds good, Dave. So again, I'm Corey Donovan. I'm president at Alta Technologies. I think most of you know what we do. We've been around since 1995, deal specifically in reuse and refurbishment in the data center. So servers, networking, data storage. We've recently expanded into desktops. We have a small team that's doing HP desktops, Dell, and Chromebooks. And we are currently on the path towards R2 because we're doing a lot of ITAD activity as well. One thing I think people know us for is quality and expertise. That's the reason I came to Alta. That shows up in that we drop ship a ton to customers. I didn't even realize it till last week when I pulled up the numbers and they surprised me. 52.7% of all of our orders in 2023 are drop shipments. So
Wow.
People are counting on Alta for that quality, trust, and integrity. And the other thing that's unique about our offering is that we do have 24/7 services. So we staff the weekends. If you need a part at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday or Sunday afternoon, we're there to ship it. In fact, we have a rolling team who answers that 24/7 line. And we say they carry the belts. They wear a 24/7 championship belt when it's their week to cover that. So, but no, today, just an example of what we're doing around ITAD specifically is we have a truck out right at the moment, stopping at 2 different data centers here in Minnesota. Yesterday, they had a crew of 4 guys out decabling everything. Today, we're, rolling it off of that raised floor and bringing back here $10 million original value of EMC, Cisco and Dell equipment that, unfortunately, today it's 6 figures, but that's 7 years later. To bring back in, test, audit, we'll provide data erasure certificates, and then redeploy that equipment after it's tested out to the rest of the world.
That's amazing. Wonderful.
That's almost a hard act to follow, Corey. That's amazing. A little bit about Iron Mountain. We're an international 7-year-old information security company. That's the big umbrella. We started with document and asset storage literally inside a mountain. That's where it comes from. But we now handle asset lifecycle management as a smaller umbrella within that. So we're looking at, document data storage, secure asset handling and destruction. Besides computer stuff, we have a fine arts division. We store, paintings. We store movie stills and film for recording artists. So we're this broad company that looks at data security as, like I said, an overarching umbrella. I'm part of the asset lifecycle management team. We also We're the group that came out of Iron Mountain's purchase of IT Renew about a year and a half ago. So I'm primarily focused, and the group is primarily focused on traditional, secondary market computer products. I primarily focused on networking from valuation sales. If you heard my name before, I've been doing this for about 25 years now, primarily in that space. But all our members on the team are we're all team players, well versed in really whatever our client requires. If it's server storage, if it's laptop, if it's enterprise memory. I mean, you name it. We kind of all work as a team to make sure we can provide everything for our clients. Some of those services we offer specifically within ITAD, on-site data wiping and data destruction. We handle client logistics. We move in empty data centers for customers. We handle reverse logistics where we'll send out 1,000 custom laptop boxes to get 1,000 laptops back, refurbish, and then some back to the customer. We're all about how can we add value to just asset recovery. And if that means that we provide a customer complete inventory of what we've taken out, we've got certificates of destruction or erasure. It's whatever the customer wants. Traditionally, the hyperscaler market has made up the majority of our business, the large computing customers out there. But with this IRM acquisition of IT Renew, we really do have now a large footprint inside Fortune 1000 worldwide as well. So that's who we are.
It's incredible.
Wow.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing. Okay, and from each of your experiences, can you explain the ITAD market today and key market conditions?
Dave, you could start this time.
First off, this is my personal opinion. Obviously, I work for Iron Mountain. This is based on years of experience and just things that kind of bubble up on occasion. I think when we're talking about ITAD specifically, I want to start with a quick little story because I just don't think people understand sometimes the scale of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
My first real experience in this ITAD marketplace was about 6 years ago now, when I worked for a very large leasing company. One of my coworkers, who's now my boss, Keith Layton, asked me to come look at some equipment that had just come into the warehouse because there was some Cisco networking. I'm like, great. So there's these 3 huge racks that come in, and at the top of each rack, there's 2 really nice Cisco Nexus switches. And I'm thinking to myself, man, those are worth $6 or $7 grand a piece. This is like a $40,000 or $50,000 sale. This is fantastic. And Keith goes, well, that's great, but each one of these racks is worth $250,000. And I'm like, what? I mean, I was blown away then because I was working in a sandbox. It was a big sandbox, but it wasn't the sandbox. So when you start talking about ITAD, it's always, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. You really don't know what's there, what the market will bear, what the market has. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone when I say that the last year or so has been a challenge for the IT and marketing industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Lead times, especially, increased demand for the secondary market that the secondary market had to fill at a rate I've never seen before. I mean, demand for equipment was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in our space, in the ITAD space, when you rely on customers to get ready to dispose of equipment, if there's nothing coming to replace it, everybody held on to things. Mm-hmm. And so probably 8 months before the general market saw, hey, what's going on with the market? We're like, what's going on with the market? People couldn't get new gear. And when people can't get new gear, they don't let go of old gear. Mm-hmm. Typically, we would think, we know a quarter ahead what's coming in and be prepared for it. And that really changed. In addition to all that, I mean, like we talk about market issues, but the ITAD market is completely fragmented. And that's both good and bad. I would love if everybody came to Iron Mountain, make my life easier. But this isn't a surprise to anyone, but people want to work with people. If Corey and the rest of the Alta team make a great impression on a client, they've earned that business. Likewise, name 100 people in this industry. Mm-hmm. Relationships still matter in this industry because there's nothing like good account management. People want to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. I think ITAD customers are always looking for good, trustworthy partners who can talk the talk, they can walk the walk. And if it's talking about green or recycling or circularity, all the better.
Mhm. Awesome. That's
Yeah.
great.
Great points. Great points, Dave. I guess I'm going to zoom out a little bit and talk about, ITAD as a term. So IT asset disposition is the term, and you think that means, right, recyclers and all these people who are R2 certified to break things down to their bare metals and plastics. But what I'm seeing is that term enveloping kind of our whole market. It's like the recyclers want to somewhat be reuse companies, and they're bringing in some of them are bringing in refurbishment and reuse, including Iron Mountain bringing IT Renew in, and you see that happening. But then you see reuse companies trying to do more of the decommissioning and the disposition, and it's like the whole industry is sort of becoming this big vector called the ITAD industry. Even the ASCDI is rebranding themselves the ASCDI, the ITAD Association. So I think we need, when we talk about ITAD, we have to realize we're talking about reuse, refurbishment, and recycling companies kind of all coming together, and that's a trend that I'm seeing, and all being a part of the so-called circular economy, which we are. And it's a great thing, and I think our industry is starting to have more purpose behind it. We always had, like when we go to these BrokerBin road shows, we talk about our wins and losses, our war stories, our big deals. But more and more, like, I think we should be talking about our purpose and what we're doing together to help with the growing e-waste problem. But beyond that, when I think about the market, I think, there's some people out there wondering, like, what's going on in this crazy market? Are we in a recession, the rolling recessions? What was going on the last couple of years with this boom? Obviously, we became an alternate supply chain to thousands and thousands of IT people. They're being told from Cisco, your lead time is 13 months. And we're like, guys, we have it right here, and you can start your project tomorrow. And that sounded interesting. And I think we introduced a lot of people to the secondary market over the last 2 years. As they get a taste for it, they see this is equipment that just works. It's just like the new hardware. It's going into, a dark server cabinet or into a server rack, and it's going to work exactly the same, right? So I think we've opened our eyes to a lot of people. But at the same time, talking to a lot of the other resellers out there, brokers, wholesalers, and so on, we've had a slowdown. There's been somewhat of a freeze up since around November, December, a dip in the market, right? And that's, I think we if you lived this story before, we've seen it, right, in previous recessions, is that the recession can be good for us once it goes into effect, if that does come. But before the recession, there's kind of this period. It's, in good times, there's a lot of money in the system. It's good for our industry. Bad times, people are looking to save money. They work with our industry. That sort of in between time, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I see IT budgets kind of slow down, freeze up. They're asked to not spend as much money, but eventually they're going to, be told by the executives, hey guys, we still have to get these projects done. Users are always using more data, consuming more storage. The cloud is heavy, right? Getting bigger and bigger. We're 8,000 data centers in the world today. And these demands aren't going to slow down. And now they've had a taste of use. So I'm excited about what's to come. But I was out walking my dog too, Renee, as you mentioned earlier. And this analogy came to me in the last couple of weeks here, and we've been talking about it here, is it sort of feels like, we're about to have, like, imagine like a big feast, like a meal, right? Except we started with dessert. That was the last 2 years. We had all the cakes and cookies, and we got a sugar rush off of it. And for the last, 4 or 5 months, and we're seeing it start to pick up again. So I think the winds are shifting now, where the market is coming back, and our month over month last month was right on par with 2022. And March has been great too. But where we're seeing now, we're eating our greens, right? We're adjusting our inventory. We're getting some of the inventory that dipped. We also went through a supply chain rebound. I think that supply chain is rebounding right now. So we've seen asset values dip. I'd say most people who are dealing in memory have seen that drop about 50%. Some of the Cisco equipment is still, some of it's hard to get, and that's still elevated, but others are rebounding. A switch we used to sell for $2,000 is back down to $600 now. And some, cases like that. So we've had to adjust our inventory and rebalance it, and now we're in a good place. And the other part of eating our greens is we're preparing for what we think is really important going forward, and that's standards. Dave's company is already there. But we're in the midst of working on our R2 standard and our ISO standards. And we feel that's going to put us in a good position. Where we see the market going is that more and more of these other recyclers, large hyperscale data centers, they're asking resellers, anyone bringing equipment out of their data centers, to have these standards in place. Like, as a company, we think we do hold ourselves to a really high standard. And even our consultant who's working with us on R2 is like, wow, you guys are way ahead of the game. but we need to prove it to the market. We need to validate it. So we're on that R2 path right now. As Dave talked about, there's like, this industry is scattered. We have these individual relationships and so on. No one company, I don't think, owns more than a few % of the whole market. But my theory, and again, it's, my theory alone, is that this industry is about to bifurcate over the next couple of years. You're going to see the companies that really commit to eating their greens right now, going for standards, raising their stakes. You're going to see them rise to the top over the next couple of years as these demands on R2 and ISO and all kinds of standards in place become more and more important. And the other companies will still be there, but they just won't see that growth opportunity that I believe is about to come. And, so we just feel it's tantamount that we get on this path towards certification.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you both for sharing all that information. And I would just say, I'm sure Rob will agree with me that all that you guys were talking about is definitely the trends that we're seeing across the board on BrokerBin as well.
Yeah, that's for sure, Renee. We're hearing it quite a bit on the phone from our clients almost on a daily basis. And obviously standards is important because we're hearing more of that. So
exactly. Got to eat our greens. Although I love starting with dessert first. My favorite way.
Right. Well, the good news is the steak is yet to come, right? Now we hope it's
that's true.
We hope it's a sirloin and not a Salisbury, but we're ready to eat the opportunities ahead of us and go after them. But yeah, and the other side of it, guys, isn't rock fuel, and don't say, just letting people know that I think to get on this wagon, if you can, if it makes sense for your company, because those of us who have the standards are going to be selling those standards into companies. And it's going to be more and more so, rather than just saying, are you an ASCDI or you need a company? Right. You also have the R2 cert. And I think it's going to grow in prominence.
That's
Renee, I hate to interrupt. Can I ask a quick question? I don't want to take us away. And this is maybe more for Dave. Are you seeing the same thing with standards? Are you having those expectations from your upside, Dave?
I mean, we have beyond R2, beyond ISO standards, we undergo fairly rigorous inspections from some of our clients per facility. So we have some client agreements that couldn't actually go into place until we passed a client-specific test for a brand new operation. So there are.
Okay, and then for your downline too, then you're expecting those same standards from your downline.
And we, you trust but verify. You inspect when you need to inspect, because the last thing you want to see is a picture of something that has one of your client's assets tags on it that made it all the way through the system, and it's on eBay. We know that serial came from us. What happened? Where did this happen? How did this happen? And those are difficult lessons. And I think that most people on this call who have worked in this industry for a long time have either been, the benefactor or something like that. Hey, look what we just found out, or oh, look what we just found out. It's tough, but if you hold yourself to high standards to begin with, it's easier to meet the requirements that your clients put on you.
Sure, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, and so how would you guys each describe the process that you're taking to assess and determine different opportunities?
For us, we've got great data. And so everything's data driven for us. We see trends, or we analyze trends after they happen. But sometimes, like Corey mentioned, for us, 2021 was all Bitcoin mining went crazy, demand for product went crazy, and we saw memory prices double or triple overnight. And that does not happen. I can think like 3 times in my career where a particular part went absolutely crazy, and we ride that wave as long as we can. So when the wave crashes, I think the wave has crashed in a lot of respects. We look at the overall process and really try to honestly under-promise to the client. You don't know what the condition of the gear is going to be unless you've seen it, or unless you rack it. You don't know if the data you're being provided by a client is accurate. And let's say you have 2 opportunities that show up at the same time with almost identical gear. I mean, it's surprising to me, but not how many large customers standardize on the same equipment. There's a reason why Cisco sells a lot or Dell sells a lot, because people want it. So you have to factor in all these different parameters in terms of how do you value something. In the worst case, which doesn't sound like the worst case, but it is, what happens if there's just too much of something? You know, again, talk about that scale, and you know, until you see a scale like that, you think, can the market really absorb 10,000 of one item? Memory, yeah. Servers, maybe. Network switches, maybe. You know, I think, and part of that under promising is that, you know, we want to make sure that we can process it quickly. We want to make sure we get the value back. And then if we discover more, because again, clients really don't know what they have. It's like, here, this is what you actually had. Here's the value that we're playing for you. So you end up looking like you're really the partner. There's too much, in my opinion, in this industry of people who overpromise and underdeliver and say, yeah, the market changed. Like, you can only do that a few times with a client, and then they're no longer your client.
Right.
I used to say my product mix here at Iron Mountain and IT Renew was a foot wide and a mile deep. I had 5 or 6 parts and plenty of them. Now that we've kind of diversified thanks to the Iron Mountain acquisition, we're working with the Fortune 1000, and not all of them do buy the same thing. It's kind of nice. So we get a greater breadth of product, which actually helps overall remote values.
Yeah.
So I mean, the process. I mean, it sounds like we're throwing darts. We're throwing darts. We want to make sure that we can meet the client's expectations, but at the same time, there's some clients we tell, you know, you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
If you think you can, there's a whole market out there. Prove us wrong. So we do.
Yeah. Awesome.
Dave, I hear you throwing darts. Sometimes it feels like the darts are just thrown at us.
Yeah.
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the IT assets that we get an opportunity to take swings at, it is what comes to our door, right? What comes knocking at our email. When I've got this equipment, can you help decommission it? And we're trying to put values on that, right? So it's a two-sided market, of course. And I love that you guys are data-driven. We're becoming the same way as a company, where we're looking at what are the volumes that our customers are historically buying. We're lucky to ship thousands of parts a day out to customers, you know, and we analyze that and what really is our sell-through. And that's one side of the market. That's the market that we know. But we know, like you said, this market is so much bigger than we think, and that behooves us to go out and do research on eBay and see what those eBay sell-through rates are on products, see what prices are going at, right? The market is always shifting in what the market really is. And I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But also, what are those sell-through rates or those search rates on BrokerBin? What are people really looking at? We take all that data in, and you know, our product managers are a little overwhelmed at times, but we do our best to provide that data to them to give them that sense. But yeah, what do you take on? It's got to be somewhat based on the market. If it was over the last 2 years, we were buying almost everything that came our way, because we knew if we got equipment, we could move it. It would, and we're still, you know, we still are operating very similarly, but we might be a little more judicious about what we're willing to put value on. Like if you are getting 800 drives, which you've only ever sold 57 of, you can't put money on all 800 drives.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of putting value on it, how do you determine the resale value, and what do you feel like is the global resale value?
What is resale value these days, right? It's like, what is market? This has been a conversation for, 10, 15 years, really, till the internet flattened our market in a lot of ways. There used to be 2 markets, a wholesale market and a retail market, and there still is to a degree. It's just not that 30 to 50% spread that there used to be in place. I've heard people say that, eBay and BrokerBin giveth and BrokerBin taketh away. You know, someone's from the 90s if they say that, right? Because they lived in a market where there was a lot of obscurity, and there was the trading and true middlemen in many cases who just knew where to get it and knew to mark it up 50% and resell it. Today, I think having the inventory really matters. But to determine that market rate, our product managers, they amaze me. I was a product manager for a while, so I respect it, but I was never as good as I know the greats in our industry are, where they know thousands of part numbers off the top of their head, what they're compatible with. And it's almost like they're breathing in this buy sell activity every day. So there's a feel as much as anything as to like what market really is. And so they know these prices, but they do rely on what they're seeing on BrokerBin, what they're seeing in come back and forth in the buy sell and activity and so on. But I almost feel like there's, the global market, it's kind of like the same thing for whatever your local market is in many ways, unless you just need something locally. But we talked about how there used to be a wholesale and retail market, and there, again, still kind of is, but today there's sort of like the quality market and the I'm not so sure market, right? The companies that you can trust, especially on online platforms like eBay. There's going to be a bunch of dealers like Dave and I selling something at $100, but then there's a few junk dealers or people that don't even really do tech listing that same part at $40, but they don't even know how to test it, never plugged it in, don't know how to back it. And so, we're trying to play in that quality tested product market. And, but at the same time, we know some end users are buying from that second market. And that's not the greatest thing in the world for us, because when they do buy it, they get a poor experience and they don't realize that there's, another tier to that market. And it's our job to inform people on that.
Right.
I think the old adage of, you have fast, good, and cheap, pick two always comes into play, because, we talk about values, we talk about markets. I had a conversation once with a supervisor of mine who had made the case to our CFO at the time that there were markets and then there were markets. And he's like, what does that mean? I'm like, it depends on who you are and what you're buying. I mean, I have the opportunity to sell something at top dollar, I'll take that. But if you know that the person you're selling to is an educated person, okay, we're going to do this deal. And you're going to buy quantity, because that's how it works. So there's really no single market value. And when we talk about those layers, like Corey alluded to, they have been compressed substantially over the last, say, 4 or 5 years. I made my living in this industry for almost 17 years as a middleman. I anticipated demand and I went after supply. And that got hard, because it's very difficult to keep one guy away from another guy. You have to provide some value. And I did. I mean, that was my job. But when you're looking at, especially ITAD, the ITAD business, one of the benefits of that business and how you work within it is sharing revenue back with a client. So if you do tell them it's a $100 part, we'll do our best to get $100, and your cut's going to be $80, you don't have $100 of skin in the game. You have $20 of skin in the game. So you can work with that. And that is an advantage to working with some of the bigger guys, because they realize that no one's going to write a check for $20 million a year. You can't. You can't do that. But when I'm looking at market, unless I'm 100% confident in knowing where it's going to go and how much I'm going to get for it, I always put in a fail-safe number. And that fail-safe is like, for memory components, for example, that's a value at which someone will buy everything I have. And that person might be in China, they may be in Minnesota, they may be in Omaha, Nebraska, but they're going to take everything, because that's your worst case scenario. But when there's demand, I might move 10 pieces at $1,000 and 20 pieces at $500 and 1,000 pieces at $20. It doesn't matter, because the markets are different. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this whole idea of customers providing product but not data to back it up, there's always margin in confusion. So when you're working with a client, unless they're really good at their own internal IT asset management, you're providing a service to them by telling them what they actually have. So if there's 500 servers, great, servers are worth 1,000 apiece, and each server turns out to have 12 drives in it. Okay, we just found 6,000 more assets for you at this value. The reporting aspect of this is how you make your customers trust you and how you provide more value. If you don't have good reporting, you're going to lose the details very quickly. So I think it's important to do that. That it's data. Provide, even if they provide everything you need, you got to double check and make sure it's right.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That is a lot of great information, you guys. I know, I'm sure everyone listening, like myself, could just listen to you guys forever talk about this.
No.
It's very interesting. But we do want to leave our listeners with some advice. So are you guys ready for that? Now your experience and guidance. What are 2 to 3 tips you have for wholesale buyers and sellers that contribute to increasing profit margins?
This sounds like it's a question up your alley, Corey. What do you tell the team?
This is an easy answer, right? Well, Dave said it repeatedly right there, trust. What does our market win with? It's trust. And we talked about people who've gone out and had a bad experience with a junk dealer on eBay, right? And they need to trust the company that they're working with. You need to make sure that you're as authentic as possible. Just tell people what's going on. We all know, like, mistakes happen, and we're beyond, I think, the years where there were a lot of games played. Hey, I'm sorry, I had a motherboard die, and really you're shipping it in from somebody else the next day. Just be straightforward. Let people know what you have. Do good business. I think we're all on the same page there. And there's so much transparency today with what we list out there, and that's key. Just another side of it is know your numbers, right? For sure, data, like Dave said, and it's know your ratios, where your revenues are to your inventory levels and margins. You need to keep those things in balance. So just look at the historics on that. Make sure you're in a healthy place, because people get out of whack when they get way too much inventory for their deal flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'd only add to that. I mean, you need to own the customer, and the best possible way to do that is providing, trustworthy service to them. If you're in this business to sell parts, you are only going to be selling parts, but you really want to be selling customer solutions. And that may be, we'll go in and we'll take all your older equipment, we'll provide certificate of erasure for all these drives, we'll help you remarket this. I mean, there has to be more than just driving up with the truck and saying, what do you have today? And don't get me wrong, there's hundreds of companies in the nation, if not the world, that they make great money doing that.
Sure.
But to get to that next step, you've got to have that relationship, and it's owning the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Rob, did
Does.
you want to jump in here and share a bit of information?
Yeah, I did. And I haven't written a lot of notes. And normally I do, as you know, Renee, in many of our meetings. I wrote two things down that just struck me. One was data and one was trust.
Mhm.
And that's really what BrokerBin is about. Obviously, if people don't realize, there's 300,000 searches a day happening on this platform. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of interesting information that can be derived on there. And I don't have the time, or nor do we have the time in the seminar, to kind of show you all the different ways to utilize that information. Or I know for you, Corey, and both Dave, I mean, you're dealing not just in single part numbers, you're dealing in lists of gear, or you're dealing with everything within that server, which is a little bit more complicated than a single part number. But I do want to focus a little bit on what you said about trust. I heard that this is a business of relationships, and absolutely. So what I can recommend for people when you're coming on to BrokerBin, and you have to try to determine who is that trusting partner. So if Dave has a bunch of these Cisco switches, and if I may, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, Renee.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see. Can you see this?
Yep, we can.
Okay, so this is just one of my demo accounts, and this is how people use it. So I'm going to type something probably you're familiar with, Dave, a Cisco switch, a 3750X48PS. Sound familiar, Dave?
Oh, it does.
Yep. So this is how people use the platform. And so when they search for a piece of equipment, they're going to search for this piece of equipment, and it's going to bring up a variety of companies to select from. Now, what we're looking at here is well, we have the Iron Mountain team, Procuri, and Alta, and there's a lot of information you can derive because there's a lot of choices. So if this is Dave and he has a whole bunch of these coming in and he's trying to look for a partner, how does he determine who is a good candidate? So what I want to focus on a little bit more is on the trust. So, well, who is Alta? BrokerBin affords you the opportunity to click on any company name you see, and this gives you a little bit of a background on that company. So I can see a little bit about their profile. Of course, I can see their feedback, but the most important things is really what their peers think of them. And so what I'm here today to tell everybody, these are probably my most important functions to how to determine what your relationships are in this business. In this case, as I look down here in Alta Technology, you have over 1,400 companies, 1,400 people who have selected you as one of their favorite vendors. That tells you something, where we have, in this case, never shows a couple, which is going to happen because those are probably your competitors, Corey. But you can get that kind of information. On top of that, you can see people's credentials. You can see a little bit about their company. You can click on their Google map to kind of validate who these companies are, because there's a lot of choices. And when I looked at the switch, if I scroll down, there's 221 different choices who could potentially be a buyer for Dave, or potentially someone who wants to buy it from Dave or Alt in this case. But
Rob,
again,
if I can jump in, I think you'll appreciate this, is that I'm pulling up these profiles, reviews, years on BrokerBin and so on as part of our credit review process. If someone's asking for net 30 terms, it plays a factor if I'm seeing a lot of positive reviews over the years and some good information on their address and their background.
Yeah, that's awesome, Corey. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's because I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but this is, again, based on the experiences that other members had with you, because we give everybody the opportunity to select who is your favorite vendors, if you want to watch them, or if you don't trust them, you never want to work with them. Now, I'm going to pick on you, Dave. Now, Iron Mountain is a fairly new entity because obviously, with they acquired IT Renew, but I can look at your profile and you're a different business model than Corey a little bit, because you're moving and you're taking in such volume. But if I kind of look at their feedback, which is solid, I can come down here. They have about 200 companies who have selected them first. But you're not listing a lot of individual pieces on the platform, are you?
We don't.
Dave?
We kind of, we're judicious with what we show and what we want to sell. I think there are sometimes, again, we talk about scale and we talk about if I showed a certain product at the actual inventory rate we own or had, that may be off-putting to the market as a whole. And that is not good for business for anybody.
Right.
We try to be cognizant of that. I mean, I've told people this before. My job on the remarketing side is to enable my customers to make money, because if they don't, they won't come back. And our job is to move this product. So anything that disrupts market like that is not good for anybody's business. And
Right.
I think anyone will tell you that if you're looking at big opportunities in ITAD, you're looking to try to move stuff around. The last thing you want to do is sell the same amount of product, the same quantity to 10 of your best friends, because you're probably going to lose some friends unless the market can just absorb it as fast as possible. It's something I think everyone has to be aware of. I mean, especially when you're buying product, people's livelihoods are online. You want to make sure that maybe it's not right fit for them. Maybe they really shouldn't buy that many. And, there may be a nudge and a wink to that, meaning there might be more coming. Don't do anything foolish, but if you've got throughput for it, your data supports it, take what you can.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, absolutely. So again, I'm a big believer in trust, and I like what you said, because if you're helping your downline make money or your upline making money, that's only going to reinforce that relationship in the long run. We'd mentioned data, and I didn't want to dig into it too much, but I know you mentioned how you determine, what kind of, let me just show you a little brief information BrokerBin can show you. By just hovering over the part number, I can tell you how many people searched for this part yesterday, in the last 7 days, in the last 30 days, how many quantities are out there, to kind of reinforce what you're talking about, Dave, and Corey as well. This is the kind of information that's at your fingertips. And if you can put this data and quality information together with that internal knowledge from your sales team that you were mentioning, Corey, I mean, it can be an extremely powerful tool. So, but yeah, I don't want to spend too much time, because that's a whole nother webinar that I can get into, or a whole nother topic that we can spend quite a bit of time to help you determine, or help organizations utilize BrokerBin information and data for that resale value.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that, Rob. I appreciate it. I have one last question for you guys. Ready?
Ready.
Where do you see the ITAD market 10 years from now? Or maybe 5 years from now?
10 years.
Tomorrow.
That's way out there. I hope I'm still around, right?
Gosh.
I know Alta will be for sure, but maybe over the next 10 years, I'm really bullish. Honestly, I'm excited about the opportunities that are there. And I think some folks don't even realize like how important we are becoming to the circular economy and reuse. And talking to analysts out there, they see us becoming more, we know we're useful, but we're going to be incredibly useful over the years ahead. And to get a little geeky with it for a second is, if you hear about a company wanting to be carbon neutral, like Amazon or whoever by 2035, right? They're on track for it. They look like things are going well, because they've only been looking at scope 1 and scope 2 emissions in those calculators and those equations, which means like the amount of the carbon footprint of the product and your own facility. And then scope 2 is like the fuel that you're using and how efficient that is and so on. That's a really basic description of it. But scope 3 is now coming into play and might be mandated in all of their calculators around their carbon footprint. Again, super geeky here, but it's really important, because what that means is scope 3 is upstream and downstream carbon footprint. And so how you get the equipment there, the manufacture of that hardware, and all the energy that goes into that, And it turns out that that's a massive amount of energy in the lifetime use of any piece of technology. I know laptops have been studied. A study out of ASU about a decade ago by Eric Williams showed that 30 or 70% of the lifetime energy use of a laptop is at the point of manufacture. It's in the factory. So that's why you're seeing companies like Microsoft, like Google, extend the life of their systems they're planning to use. They've come out and committed to 6 years at Microsoft. Google is now just recently followed. You're seeing this at all the big hyperscalers. They're trying to extend the life of their servers. What does that mean? It means at a certain point, there's going to be more third-party maintenance, which means more parts driven to our market and parts business. They're going to try to buy parts from us to extend the life of their equipment. And then now they're looking at downstream too. And so it behooves them to find a reuse partner who will put it out towards reuse, because that's important to their calculations too. Recycling uses a lot of energy. It means something's going to be manufactured again. But reuse sets that clock back and can help them meet their goals, because they don't really know how to meet the goals other than extending life and working towards the reuse market, whether they're buying for reuse or they're selling equipment downstream to be reused again. And so I'm really, pretty bullish over the next, it may take a little while to really kickstart, but that's one of the reasons we're chasing R2 standard and ITAD in general, because it's really important to get that equipment and become a part of that value stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a tough act to follow, Corey. I never finished my master's degree in anything, so I'm like, I got most of that. Where I think it would be in the next 10 years is that what we call ITAD right now is really going to become the secondary market. And it's also what we call third-party maintenance. It's also called what we call parts depoting. I mean, for this industry, the secondary market to remain successful, and for ITAD business to really be successful, you have to be more involved in all aspects of the customer's IT lifecycle. If that means procurement, maybe on the new side, but certainly on the secondary market side, it means asset management. Again, I am shocked is probably the correct word by how little information clients actually keep on the products they own. There's an asset tag, but they don't know anything else about it. And that's a huge, huge opportunity for any customer or any company that wants to get into that business. Third-party maintenance you mentioned, again, very important, very cost-effective, but you have to have someone run it. And then the most important thing for me and for our company is data security. So when we're talking about, we just took out 1,000 laptops, but we didn't wipe the drives. Do they need to be wiped? I'm like, yes, they do. So the future in 10 years, I think is going to be, you'll see the ITAD industry grow and develop into more like almost like an outsourced, better IT department. And I've been through outsourcing and insourcing several times in my career. It happens. There's pros and cons going to the cloud and coming back. But the fact of the matter is, if there's not budget for a company to really track this information, they're never going to do it. And that's an opportunity for us as part of a service, as part of a bigger package, as part of that, that mutual trust, that if you're getting into this business and just thinking I'm going to sell parts, go ahead. But the future is really managing the customer, owning the customer, and building your business.
Yeah, I love that.
Wow.
I love that.
Fantastic.
We are, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go through one question here. And this is a question that came in as you guys were talking, or as we were talking here. Please discuss the market's preference for manufacturer certified refurbished equipment versus equipment refurbished by a third party, say a different BrokerBin member or some other third party. Any thoughts?
I ran into something like this week where a customer had to have something that was directly from the manufacturer. I said, I can't do that, but I can do refurbished by the manufacturer if that's what we require. I mean, I think the cat's out of the bag for most products in that, if a major manufacturer puts their label on it, that's fantastic. Maybe they're getting newer gear, maybe it's at a discount, but unless there is a contractual requirement that you only purchase equipment from a manufacturer, I don't see the benefit. But then I've been in this business for 25 years. So, ultimately though, if you want to make money and you want to keep the customer's trust, if you can provide it. If you then can talk to them and show them, hey, financially, you're leaving a lot of money on the table here. Yeah. There might be a better way to do this. Right. That's your job as a salesman. But I don't see any difference in that. There's no secret sauce. I wish there was. Yeah. And remanufacturing probably costs just as much for a company like Cisco or Dell or a laptop manufacturer as manufacturing does. You're doing a lot of extra work.
Yeah, I think so. It's really, so David talked about owning the relationship, right? Getting into these relationships. And I don't know, we find that I think the preference happens before we even get to talk to the customer, right? They don't even, for the customers who are going to go straight to manufacturer certified or refurbished, like my wife wants that for vehicles, and I'm willing to go to the open market for used cars and so on. It's just kind of a personal preference thing, but we need to be in those conversations, because when we are, I find that they're happy with used and from the secondary market from a trusted reseller. And why? I mean, a couple of reasons. One is that the manufacturer certified is not like the vehicle market. In that market, there's a little split between the open market and the certified. When I found equipment from the manufacturers, it's a massive disparity. Their pricing is so much higher than the open market pricing can be in most cases. The other thing is availability. They don't always have quite a wide array of equipment. And so I think, I think customers are getting a little frustrated with the manufacturers these days, and it does open the door for us in an opportunity. I've been, proud to be a part of the right to repair movement. We've got a bill being heard in the Judiciary Committee tomorrow at the Capitol, and hoping it gets to the floor here in Minnesota. These are going on all over the country, and we see IT people, when I talk to them, they're on board with the right to repair movement. They're frustrated with the mandates and the fear, uncertainty, and doubt created by the manufacturers. And I think they're going to be more open to the open market as time goes on. And but it's up to us to instill that trust, to deliver a quality product, a great experience, and to make sure that we do show up so that they consider used as an option.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely comes back to the trust again. One more question. With the increase of companies moving to remote workforces, what are some trends or processes in regards to managing any devices that are moving towards end of life or replacement?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we had done for one of our clients that had a completely remote sales force, and we sent out custom boxes so they could send their laptops in. We could wipe the drives and then send them back to the IT department for either reuse or, and I think in this case, they also had some financial obligations with the product. But, data security, if you've got 1,000 people working at home, is probably even more paramount than the data center. So I think it goes back to owning the client, but also goes back to helping a client understand best practices for security. And that goes beyond ITAD. But it's an opportunity for any company listening. Like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you talked about how can we help you? And you go from there.
I think about the data boom, which has already happened to some degree. Beyond facilitating those users, we're more on the enterprise side. So I think about the cloud, how heavy the cloud is, right? All these servers facilitating that increase in storage and compute. You have engineers, you have designers working on high resolution files in the YouTube world, right? And TikTok and all the video platforms, video being transferred between users here and editors overseas, back and forth. And as users are more and more remote and distant, I can only imagine the demands as the compute demands locally increase, the demands in the cloud increase, and it should lead to more and more opportunities for hyperscale data center opportunities, whether we're buying back equipment or facilitating that. But yeah, we're also seeing a boom in access points and sales of that as well, when people are working remotely out of co-working spaces and coffee shops or from home. Yeah,
great. We got one comment that says, good info. Thanks, guys. There you go. Yes. So really, truly, thank you guys for joining us today. For those of you listening, if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to reach out to myself or Rob, your account manager at BrokerBin, or Corey and Dave directly. Any one of us would be happy to help. And as mentioned at the start, we'll send a follow-up email with today's recording, so you have that as well. And speaking of trust and relationships, you guys know that I cannot let this moment pass without reminding everyone about Prague, which is right around the corner, May 15th through the 17th. And the roadshows truly, truly are an excellent way to meet and connect with ITAD professionals like Corey and Dave. In fact, both Alta and Mountain are attending Prague. Procure will be there as well. Just a little side note, there's plenty of places to grab a drink. As always, thank you so much for your membership and continued participation in our network. We appreciate you all so much. You can check out our additional resources, including past webinars, online at BrokerBin.
Corey, Dave, thanks very much. I mean, and a lot of admiration, not just for the commitment, but the resources you guys have
Yes.
placed in this growth
My pleasure.
arena.
Glad to be here.
And a lot of appreciation for the conduit that you are for our marketplace and really for the reuse economy going forward. And it's an honor to be here. Hopefully it was helpful for people. All of us, let's continue this conversation online and at future road shows and events. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See you guys in Prague.
Yep.